okay, you strike at me, I'm gonna strike at you back.
In October of 1962, the United States and the Soviet Union had their fingers on the trigger. What he did instead may have saved every person alive today. Third officer, a man named Vasily Arkhipov, says no. We are eyeball to eyeball, and I think the other fellow just blinked. The same pressure shows up in your life. Kennedy was told that he was weak, that he was being weak. What does the other side of this look like? In October of 1962, the United States and the Soviet Union had their fingers on the trigger. Every military advisor in the room was telling Kennedy to pull it. What he did instead may have saved every person alive today. Welcome to Very Human History, the podcast that finds the human lessons inside the stories that shape our world. My name is Sergio,
And I'm Saida.
and if you're new here, hit the subscribe button or follows so you cannot miss an episode. Now, let's get into it. The story for today that we're covering, it's about pressure. What you do when you have pressure in front of you. But before we get there, I need to tell you about a room that I was in which I did everything wrong.
Let's hear it. Let's hear it. Your stories are good.
I have been working on this presentation for months. It was a Bible study, a big one, with slides, graphics, research, and I have been putting everything into it. And the setting really mattered to me because we had both believers and unbelievers in the room, and I wanted to make sure, that we set a good example. And we also had people that were figuring out the faith, and you know, I wanted to do a good job. So I started presenting, and I almost immediately I noticed someone in the room in the group that was not very pleased. They were shaking their heads, talking under their breaths to the next person. And you know how it is, body language, it tells you right away that something is going on. I keep going, but I can feel it building inside of me because I know what's coming. The hand goes up, and this person does what they don't ask a question, they just push back. And something inside me snapped. I thought I had the right moment. I thought I need to put this person in place. So I did. I became combative. I became explosive. I cut them off in front of everybody. And I did it without any self control. If I'm being honest with you, it felt good in the moment. But then when time went by, it just didn't work. I felt really bad about it. And even though I had the facts on my side, that wasn't enough. So I wonder if there a moment that you've had a situation similar to mine.
I wanted my birth to be as natural as possible. Since I couldn't have that, I told them, look, I don't want to get no epidural. I don't want no payments. I'm just going to do it because, I don't want a long term, my back hurting or anything like that. So I told them anything that I say, anything that I do, just remind me why I don't want an epidural and always say no, even
I
if
remember.
I'm begging for it.
Mhm.
So they start me with Pitocin, which is what starts the contractions. And the nurse that was on call that night, because it happened during the night, she came back to me and she's like, "Oh, do you want me to get everything ready, the papers for you to sign to get your epidural?" And I looked at her and I was like, "I don't want an epidural." Like, if you see my birth plan, I do not want an epidural. And then she looked at me like, "Are you joking?" And then she was like, "Okay." She was like, "I'm gonna let you, let the Pitocin flow, and then you let me know when I come back. And I was like, okay. So the Pitocin's flowing, the pain is going up, and she was like, okay, so are you ready for the epidural? I'm like, I told you I don't want an epidural. But that pressure on someone who has never given birth, who already told you, I don't want this, but just because you think that you know better, they should follow what you said. And thank God the surgeon was there to kind of hold my hand and be like, no, because there was a point where I was
You
begging for
really
it.
wanted it,
And
yes.
surgeon was like, no, you're okay. It's almost over. It's almost over. But it was so frustrating having someone that thinks I know, or probably she knew better than I did. But at the moment, it's like, let me do my thing.
Hmm.
Don't just push it before I even feel anything.
You know the feeling. Someone pushes you in front of other people, and everything inside you, your pride, your preparation, your sense of fairness, rises up at the same time. And their response is already forming before you've ever decided to respond. It feels like justice. It feels like finally. It feels completely reasonable because the other person started it and you are simply finishing it. That's what pressure does in those moments. It doesn't announce itself as pressure, it disguises itself as the obvious next move, as the thing any reasonable person would do in your position. And so you do it. You say the thing, you make the move, you let the moment decide. And then later, sometimes an hour later, sometimes the next morning, you replay it and you realize the person that showed up in that moment was not who you actually wanted to be. The response felt right and cost you something you didn't intend to pay. In October of 1962, John F. Kennedy sat in a room where everyone was telling him to finish it, to make the move, to respond with everything he had. He had the facts, he had the military, he had every right. But he and another man on the opposite side of the world had to decide whether to let the pressure choose or choose something harder themselves. This is the story of what they chose instead. It is October 15, 1962, early morning, Washington, D.C. A CIA photo analyst named Dino Bugioni is sitting at a light table, going through aerial photographs taken the day before by a U-2 spy plane flying over western Cuba. He has looked at thousands of these images. He knows what Soviet military equipment looks like from 70,000 feet. He leans in. What he's looking at are launch sites, not anti aircraft missiles, not defensive weapons, ballistic missile sites, offensive nuclear weapons capable of reaching Washington, New York, Chicago, cities all across the eastern United States within minutes of launch. He picks up the phone. Within hours, the photographs are in front of President John F. Kennedy's national security team. By the morning of October 16th, Kennedy himself is looking at them. He has known for weeks that the Soviets were sending military equipment to Cuba. His own administration had publicly assured the American people that whatever the Soviets were building on the island, it was defensive, nothing to worry about. The photographs say something different. Kennedy is 45 years old. He has been president for less than 2 years. He is still dealing with the fallout of Bay of Pigs, a disastrous CIA backed invasion of Cuba the year before that failed completely and embarrassed his administration in front of the entire world. Now, this. He immediately forms a secret advisory group. They call it ESCOM, the Executive Committee of the National Security Council. About 15 men, cabinet members, military chiefs, intelligence officials, and a handful of trusted advisors. Their job is to figure out what to do before the Soviets realize the US knows what they have found. The meetings are recorded. Kennedy turns on a taping system without telling most of the people in the room. Those recordings still exist. And what they capture is 13 days of the most consequential decision making in modern history. Here is who is in that room, and here's what they want. The military chiefs, led by Air Force General Curtis LeMay, want to act immediately and with force. LeMay is blunt. He tells Kennedy directly that a naval blockade, a defensive move, is the equivalent of abasement. He uses the word Munich, as in Chamberlain, as in 1938, as in the moment the world gave Hitler an inch and got a war. LeMay wants airstrikes. Destroy the missile sites before they become operational. And then, if needed, a full invasion of Cuba. He believes the Soviets will not respond militarily. He believes they will back down. Other advisors push for a diplomatic solution first. Former Secretary of State Dean Acheson also wants airstrikes, fast and surgical. Some want to go directly to Khrushchev privately before doing anything public. Kennedy listens to all of it. What the recordings show, and this is the part that gets lost in the history books, is a president who keeps asking the question nobody else in the room is asking. What happens next? Every time someone proposes a strike, Kennedy comes back to the same point. If we hit the missile sites, what do the Soviets do? If they respond in Cuba, what do we do then? If they move on Berlin, because Berlin is always on the table, what does that look like? Where does this end? The men around him are thinking about the move in front of them. Kennedy is thinking about the move after that, and the move after that. He is not afraid to use force. He makes that clear. But he's determined not to start something that no one in that room or anywhere on the planet actually knows how to stop. He chooses a naval blockade. They call it a quarantine because a blockade is technically an act of war under international law. And Kennedy is not ready to cross that line yet. American warships will form a line in the Atlantic. Any Soviet ships carrying military equipment will be stopped and turned around. It is not the aggressive move his military advisors want. It is a signal, a line drawn in the ocean, a way of saying, we know and you know we know, and we are not going to pretend otherwise. But we're giving you a way out. Now, let's go to Moscow, because Kennedy is not the only man in a difficult room. Nikita Khrushchev is 68 years old. He is the leader of the Soviet Union, a man who grew up in poverty, survived Stalin's purges, clawed his way to the top of the most ruthless political system on earth. And he's loud, unpredictably, sometimes crude. He's also, in his own way, trying to avoid war. The decision to put missiles in Cuba was his. His reasoning was partly strategic. The United States have nuclear missiles in Turkey, pointed at the Soviet Union. Khrushchev saw Cuba as the equivalent move. If America can put weapons on our doorsteps, we can put weapons on theirs. But he also genuinely believed it would protect Cuba. The Bay of Pigs have made clear that the U.S. was willing to move against Castro. Khrushchev thought a nuclear deterrent on the island would make America think twice. What he did not count on was how fast the Americans would find out, or how hard Kennedy would be forced to respond publicly. On October 22nd, Kennedy goes on national television and tells the American people what it is in Cuba. He announces the quarantine. He makes clear that any nuclear missiles launched from Cuba against any nation in the Western Hemisphere would be considered an attack by the Soviet Union on the United States, and it will be met with full force. The world knows now Soviet ships are already on their way to Cuba. They are loaded with more military equipment. They are headed directly toward the American quarantine line. Khrushchev has a decision to make. His military advisors are telling him not to back down, that backing down is weakness, that weakness invites aggression, that the Soviet Union cannot be seen retreating from the Americans. He is hearing the same thing Kennedy is hearing from the opposite direction. October 24th, the Soviet ships are close to the quarantine line. Kennedy is in the White House. His brother Robert, the Attorney General, is one of the few people he trusts completely in these meetings. The Soviet ships slow down. Then they stop. Then they turn around. Secretary of State Dean Rusk leans over to a colleague and says quietly, "We are eyeball to eyeball," and I think the other fellow just blinked. But the crisis is not over. The missiles already in Cuba are still there, still being assembled. American U-2 flights are still monitoring the sites daily. On October 27th, what historians now call Black Saturday, everything literally comes apart. An American U-2 spy plane is shot down over Cuba. The pilot, Major Rudolph Anderson, is killed. It is the first direct military casualty of the crisis. Kennedy's military advisors immediately push for retaliation airstrikes. At the same moment, another U-2 accidentally drifts into Soviet airspace over Alaska. The Soviets sent fighter jets up to intercept it. The US sent armed fighter jets up in response to protect it. For the stretch of time, nobody knows exactly how long, military jets from both superpowers are in the air at the same time, flying toward each other, with no orders about what to do if they actually meet. The American jets find the U-2 and pull up alongside it. The Soviet jets are closing in from the other direction. No one has a script of what happens if this goes wrong. And then the Soviet jets pull off. They turn back toward their own airspace. The American jets hold their position until the U-2 is clear. Nobody fires. Nobody gives the order to engage. The whole thing dissolves as fast as it appeared, like it almost didn't happen at all. An underwater submarine, unknown to anyone in Washington or Moscow at the time, a Soviet submarine called B-59 is being depth charged by American destroyers trying to force it to the surface. The submarine has lost contact with Moscow. It has no way of knowing whether the war has already started. It is carrying a nuclear torpedo. 3 officers on the submarine have to agree before the torpedo can be fired. The captain and the political officer both say yes. The 3rd officer, a man named Vasily Arkhipov, says no. He holds his position. He does not agree. The torpedo is not fired. Kennedy ignores the advice to retaliate for the U-2 shutdown, but something else is already in motion. On October 26, Khrushchev does something unexpected. He sends Kennedy a private letter, not formal diplomatic language, something more personal than that. He writes about the war like a rope that 2 men keep pulling until it cuts through. He tells Kennedy directly that neither of them should be the one to pull it tighter. He reads less like a Soviet premier and more like a man who is genuinely afraid of where this is going. Kennedy reads it, and then he sends his brother, Robert, to meet secretly with the Soviet ambassador, Anatoly Dobrynin. The message is this: the US will publicly pledge not to invade Cuba, and quietly, privately, not to be made public, the American missiles in Turkey will be removed within a few months. Not as part of a formal deal, not announced, just done. Kennedy is offering Khrushchev a way to say yes without looking like he lost. Khrushchev takes it. On October 28th, he announces on Moscow radio that the Soviet missiles will be dismantled and returned to the Soviet Union. The crisis is over. And it ends not with a strike or an invasion or a show of overwhelming force. It ends because two men on the opposite side of the world, under pressure from their own advisors, their own military, their own publics, both decided that the right move is to find a way out. Kennedy is assassinated months later, in November of 1963. Khrushchev is removed from power by his own party in 1964, in part because hardliners inside the Soviet government see what happened in Cuba as a humiliation. He chose the world over his own reputation, and his own party made him pay for it. Neither man is around to see how history eventually judges October of 1962. Here's what actually happened in that room. Kennedy's generals told him a strike was a strong move, that backing down sends the wrong message, that the Soviets would read restraint as weakness and push harder the next time. Kennedy heard it all, and then he asked the question they weren't asking. What does the world look like on the other side of this? Because a strike does not end the story. It starts the next chapter. And he could not see a version of that chapter that did not end somewhere catastrophic. Khrushchev faced the exact same pressure from the opposite direction. His advisors told him standing firm was strength, that backing down in front of the Americans would damage the Soviet credibility everywhere: Cuba, Europe, the entire Cold War. That a great power does not blink. But here's what the records show. Khrushchev did not want a war. That is not a guess. That is what historians who have gone through the Soviet side on this have concluded. The man who put the missiles in Cuba in the first place, the man who seemed willing to push the world to the edge, was never actually willing to go over it. He orders the ships to turn around. He agrees to dismantle the missiles. And then, because he's also a politician who has to go home and face his own people, he calls it a victory. In his memoir, he describes the outcome as a triumph of Soviet foreign policy, a personal triumph. He frames it as protecting Cuba from American invasion, not a retreat, a mission accomplished. Maybe he believed that. Maybe it was the only way he could live with that decision. Either way, he made it. He chose the world over his reputation. And 2 years later, his own party removed him from power. When they confronted him, he didn't fight back. He said, "I am old and tired. I won't put up a fight." The man who almost started a nuclear war went home quietly because he was doing the same thing, the same math Kennedy was doing. Here's the thing about pressure. Pressure always has a recommendation. It always tells you the same thing. Escalate, hit back, hold the line. Don't let them think you are soft. Pressure is loud. Pressure is urgent. Pressure fills the room. And if you let it, pressure makes the decision for you. You don't even realize it happened. You just went along with the logic of the moment until the moment made the choice. What Kennedy and Khrushchev did, separately without coordination, under enormous weight, was refuse to let the pressure decide. They looked at where the pressure was pointing, and they chose something harder. Not because backing down felt good, it didn't. Kennedy took fire from his own military for weeks. Khrushchev lost his job. They chose it because strength is not the same as escalating, and both of them knew the difference.
You know what? I retract myself from what I said earlier. When you
Mm-hmm.
brought this topic to me, I was like, because like you have been bugging about this one for a while now.
Yes.
And I keep saying no and no and no because I remember what they taught me in school, but it was not in so much detail as we learned today. And what I find it really interesting is how like everything went wrong. Like everything that could go wrong went wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But just because Kennedy and Khrushchev,
Yeah, let's call him Khrushchev. Sorry, guys.
sorry, we're learning the names, and also the third commander that was in the submarine, they made the right calls because these could have easily
Mhm.
could have escalated to
Yes.
another level.
Something that I find fascinating is that Kennedy was told that he was weak, that he was being weak. So my question to you is, would you allow something like that to happen? What do you think of that level of disrespect against the president?
It was a little bit more delicate because not only his presidency, or at least what he was saying about him, was at stake, but also like the lives of many people. So I think at that point he didn't really care that they call him weak. He
Yeah.
was just kind of thinking like ahead, like, okay, what happens if it goes wrong?
And also is the fact that it was during the Cold War. There is a lot going on in Berlin, and people are trying to contain. They want to keep this war cold and make sure that things don't go and escalate.
Because like right now, what were we worried about? Gas going up, groceries going up, but then coming out of World War II, and then having like pieces of, oh, we want to start another war. It was probably a little bit more troubling for people,
They will have to think
for
about it
leaders. Like,
twice.
yeah, because like you and I, we have
Mhm.
not come out of war. We know what it's like to feel scared of a pandemic because we
Yeah.
came out of that. Like, like we
And
don't
the
want another
pandemic
one.
wasn't really that bad, I would say.
But you see how people got scared. Like New
Mhm.
York City was empty.
Yes.
New York City was
Yes.
empty. Like it's never empty. But you know what I'm saying? It's like we know what that's like. Like that we know that PTSD, but we don't know the PTSD of a
A war.
war. Yeah. So I think in a way they were probably thinking about that. And I found it, I found it interesting how a Russian leader just kind of gave in like that.
Let me bring some context as to why I believe Khrushchev is going through what he's going through, and he's saying, doing everything he can to avoid it.
Okay.
Especially because if you remember, he sent a personal letter to Kennedy
Yes.
saying, dude, it takes two basically to tango. Let's not make this worse. And this is what I found. Uh, he formed his perspective of the war. So I looked into it a little bit, and it turns out that Khrushchev was actually at Stalingrad.
Yes.
Stalingrad is a place where for the Russians and stuff like that, and it was a massive battle between Nazi and Germany. Between Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union during the World War II. Fought inside the city, street by street, building by building, room by room. It lasted for 200 days, and it produced close to 2 million casualties combined.
Wow.
The guy was a commander in that battle. And to put it in perspective, the average life expectancy of a soldier, of a Soviet soldier that went into that battle, was in hours. It was measured in hours instead of days.
Are you serious?
Yes, because people would die. And he was a political commissioner in there, but it doesn't stay there. It's also the fact that he lost his son in this war.
Oh, really?
Yeah, his son was a fighter pilot, and it was shut down in 1943. So he
Mm.
never came home.
It makes sense now.
You see what I'm saying? Like,
Yes.
there is a reason as to why this guy's probably saying, you know what, guys, let's not just be quick to go to war, because I know the weight of the war, what it is like, the weight, the experience of losing someone during the war. And the same we could say about Vasily Arkhipov, I think is his name. I always forget how to say it. But he was one of the three and the only one that said, we're not going to do this thing, even though they're being bombarded.
A really uncomfortable submarine ride after
Yeah,
that.
yeah. In 1961, 1 year before the Cuban Missile Crisis, Arkhipov was the deputy commander of the Soviet submarine K-19.
Okay.
That submarine suffered a catastrophic nuclear reactor failure in the middle of the Atlantic.
Oh no.
The crew,
They were underwater?
yes, the crew had to manually repair the reactor with no proper equipment and no protection. Several crew members died from radiation exposure shortly after. So you see, there is a lot going on with these people that are, dude,
Like it doesn't matter how tough you are. If
yeah,
you have something that
it's
makes you
stopping you.
think, that's stopping you, that it makes you reflect or makes you
Mhm.
think twice, it's that's enough for you to make a difference.
And the same we could say about Kennedy. He kept asking, okay, we do this, we do that, but what happens next? What's going to happen next? Do you think that most people actually think that way under pressure?
In the heat of the moment, no. And if you feel like it's the tension, because like this happened during the Cold War,
Yes.
you have them having people going up to space, the whole thing with Berlin happening, and it's US and Russia. US and Russia. So it's like the ones that have going at it, now they want to go at it at a nuclear level. I'm pretty sure that must have been scary for the people, civilians mainly, watching all this getting unfold. Because we can talk about it now and be like, oh, it didn't happen, but how were we during COVID? Just want to say
Yeah.
that before we knew that it was like, oh, come on, it's
That's
just a
true.
call. But how were we at the beginning of COVID?
Oh, I remember during COVID, I was telling people, oh my God, at work.
Remember we were watching like the statistics of all the people that have died throughout the world, and that thing just by the minute kept going on. We're like, oh my God, people are dying. La, la, la.
It almost felt like a zombie attack or something.
Walmart letting people one by one. Yo.
That was so, that was exciting. Those 2020 was a dumb year. 2020, 2021,
Absolutely.
2022.
If this whole thing was an experiment of all humanity, it worked.
Yeah.
It worked.
Definitely
It worked.
Yeah. That moment at the Bible study, I had the facts. I had the research. I had months of preparation behind me. I still got it wrong. Not because I wasn't prepared, but because I let pressure in that room make the decision before I could. That's the thing Kennedy understood that his generals didn't. Having the right, having the facts, having the power, having the reasonable justification to escalate, that is not the same as escalating being the right move. He sat in that room and he asked one question before he acted. What does the other side of this looks like? Not what the people around me are telling me to do. What does the world look like when this is over? And did I choose that outcome, or did the pressure choose for me? The next time you feel that rise, that heat, that sense of finally, that completely reasonable justification forming in your chest before you've even decided anything, stop. Not forever, just long enough to ask the question, what does the other side of this look like? Because pressure will give you 100 reasons to act. It will make the escalation feel obvious. It will make the restraint feel like weakness. But the most powerful person in that room is really the one who hits the hardest. It is the one who decides consciously, deliberately, what this moment is going to cost before they spend it. I had to go back and apologize. The relationship was repaired, but I can't undo what happened in that room in front of those people. You don't have to learn that the hard way. Pressure will always tell you to escalate. Make sure you are the one making the call. Think about the last time someone challenged you in front of other people, at work, at home, in a group where everyone was watching and you felt it? What if the most powerful move in that room wasn't what everyone was expecting, but the one nobody saw coming? The pause, the breathe. That is not weakness. That is the hardest thing a human being can do in a charged moment. To feel the weight of the pressure, the embarrassment, the anger, the justification, and still be the one deciding. Not the emotion, not the room, you. Most people never get there. Most people let the moment choose. They lower themselves to whatever the pressure demands and call it being human. But you're not most people. You are called to something harder than your instincts, than your first reaction. Something that looks less like everyone else in the room and more like the person you actually want to be. Imagine what it feels like to walk out of that room knowing you chose, not that you won, not that you destroyed the argument, that you were in control of yourself when the pressure was telling you not to be. Make sure you are the one making the call. 13 days, two men, opposite sides of the world. Both had every right to escalate. Both had the military, the facts, the justification. Both had the room full of people telling them that backing down was weakness. They chose control, and the world is still here because of it. The same pressure shows up in your life. Smaller rooms, of course, smaller stakes, but the same voice. The same moment where everything around you is pushing you towards the obvious move. When that moment comes, and it will, are you going to let the pressure decide, or are you going to be the one making the call?
Thank you for watching Very Human History. If this episode meant anything to you, share it with someone who might need to hear it. Se me fue.
It's okay. She does get nervous at times.
Wait.
Thank you guys for watching. You have a wonderful week. Bye bye.
Bye bye.